Boy, how time flies when you're not having fun. 40 years after this, lawmakers asking now what lawmakers asked then. Who knew what and when? And how high up does this mess go? Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. What a day. 4 decades to the day, the very day, after the first Watergate hearing, a hearing that would trigger still more hearings, still more revelations, and for an embattled White House, more trouble. That was then. Hearing the back and forth today, this IRS thing, much different now?
What did the president know, and when did he first know it?
Who started the targeting? Who knew? When did they know? And how high did it go?
Weird, huh? This is the acting IRS Commissioner, Stephen Miller, found himself in the hot seat after the agency was found to be targeting conservative groups. Miller blowing it off as foolish mistakes, but unlike key Watergate figures, he wasn't really providing many of any answers.
How can we not conclude that you misled this committee?
So that was a lot of questions, sir.
It's one. How can we conclude that you did not mislead this committee?
I did not mislead the committee.
Are you aware of the installation of any listening devices in the Oval Office of the President?
I was aware of listening devices. Yes, sir.
You're the commissioner. Who is responsible? You conducted the investigation. Who was responsible?
I don't have that name, sir. I tell you.
Why don't you have the
name that I was originally.
Have you asked anybody?
Did you say these things as an advocate, that is, that further support and perjury should continue, or as examples why it should not continue?
As why it should not continue.
Did you make that clear to the president?
Absolutely.
Why did you say you had notes if you don't think you have notes?
Sir, please.
Please.
I don't.
Please. Do you have notes or don't you have notes?
I don't know.
To historian Larry Sabato over whether what is going on now resembles anything like what was on the verge of exploding back then. Larry, what do you think?
Boy, that brought back memories, Neil. My eyes were glued to the TV set then, as all of our eyes were back in 1973. Remember, the key difference is it took 11 months to get to the opening of the Senate hearings on Watergate in 1973. It started in June of 72. Well, some of this just started. Yes, Benghazi was in September of last year, but the other two scandals, including the IRS scandal that was covered today, we just became aware of it really in the last few days. So who knows where it will go from here? The real facts matter.
You know what's interesting, too, and you're right to say, first of all, the Watergate hearing started in the House, led to the Senate, but they were over an event that had occurred roughly a year prior, the Watergate break-in. House tips it off. Most think these hearings are going to be short-lived. They were sort of like a political cabal. They'd go nowhere fast. And then the thing with hearings is once people start testifying, you compare their testimony and their differing interpretations, and then other people are telling the truth, others are lying. It creates a sort of a buzz feed. Way too early to tell, but a number of congressmen I've already talked to, Larry, say it's not going to be one and done here. There are going to be other hearings. There are going to be other issues. There are going to be other witnesses brought forth. There are other deals behind the scenes being made to bring other people forth. How big do you think this gets?
Well, it's certainly going to continue. There's no doubt about that, because there will be other hearings and there will be other revelations. When people focus in on a subject or an administration and they start pulling pieces of string, you know, occasionally you can lose the whole sweater. You just never know what's, you know, how long the string is when you start pulling it. So we'll just have to see how it unfolds. I think the best advice Republicans have gotten has been from people like Charles Krauthammer, who have said to them, don't go beyond the facts. Don't get partisan. Don't get overheated. Stick to the facts. Let the facts speak for themselves.
Now, when we let the facts speak for themselves, invariably, I remember what happened in Watergate. We showed the Butterfield clip where he revealed a White House taping system, and that was a game changer, obviously. That was well in to the hearings that we found this out. And then there was conflicting testimony between top administration officials and then John Dean that argued with the veracity of those statements. We've not seen anything approaching that now. But invariably what they want to look for is whether higher-ups were calling the shots to go after these conservative groups, or whether these are just lone rogue agents doing this. What does your gut tell you where this sort of thing will go?
You know, I never speculate without the facts. Only in elections, Neil, when I'm predicting elections, and I'm betting with you, so I know I'll win. But I don't know. In this particular case, I can't tell you, but I do know this. The right way to proceed is always to start at the bottom layer, and then you move up to the next layer and the next layer. It may stop at some point,
right,
and that'll be the end of it, or it could go higher. But you never know unless you ask the questions. You know, you mentioned Butterfield's revelation, which was an unbelievable bombshell, that there was a taping system in the White House and Camp David and other places. Only a handful of people knew that, even in the White House and in the Secret Service. So you never know what's there. I don't think they have a taping system, but as I say, you just don't know what's there until you ask questions.
All right. Now, assuming there is no taping system here, the president has been quick to dismiss any comparisons with Watergate. I want you to get your quick take on his take on this.
How do you feel about comparisons by some of your critics of this week's scandals to those that happened under the Nixon administration?
Well, yeah, I'll let you guys engage in those comparisons, and you can go ahead and read the history, I think, and draw your own conclusions.
What do you think?
Well, he was very smart not to mention Nixon. Notice he denied the reporter and all the reporters assembled a soundbite, which they would have had he said Nixon. So he avoided that "I am not a crook" moment that you never want to have in the midst of a scandal. But still, it is interesting to me that so many comparisons are being made. Maybe they're unfair. Nothing's fair about politics. Right. He's getting a grilling that he really never had during the first term, at least not in the scandal arena.
All right, I'll just leave you with this question, though, because it's bigger than this particular potential scandal, because you have the Justice Department, of course, that had singled out AP reporters. You have Health and Human Services, which might have gone beyond the health care law, hitting up private companies to pay for publicity for the health care law, to say nothing of the back and forths and talking points, and the General David Petraeus is saying, I want out of these talking points. So a lot of these bubbling things concurrently. Do any one of them explode, or do they sort of divide and conquer themselves, and that's what the administration hopes for?
Well, you never know. Again, go back to Watergate. Now we think, oh, it was just about this one thing, about the taping and Nixon's involvement after the fact in the cover-up. In fact, during the Watergate scandal, there were at least 7 or 8 different scandals involving, you know, Nixon's taxes and this administration aid and that administration aid. So again, it was a collection of scandals that we collectively refer to as Watergate, and these 3 may be lumped together eventually as time goes on.
All right, Larry Sabato, thank you very much. Before we cut to our next story, I just want to leave you with a comment out of UPI at the time of those opening Watergate hearings 40 years ago today, that they will be a short-lived affair, a political opportunity for Democrats to pounce on a president who so far seems completely unaffected.